Hello and welcome to the Loan Officer Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Johnstone, and I have an incredible offer for you today. What we've done is we've taken the 10 most profitable methods to grow your mortgage business that we have learned from interviewing the producers on this podcast, many of whom are doing over $100 million in volume per year. And we've packaged them together into a condensed 45-minute training where you get to learn the 10 most successful and profitable activities that you should be running in your mortgage business. Then we show you how to automate those processes with people and systems so that they run and continue to produce loan applications and new partners that want to send you business pre-booked into your calendar without you having to do any cold calls or chasing or really any work. It's a blueprint for you to be able to produce more in your business while actually working less. And you can go get that training today for free at chriswebinar.com. That's chriswebinar.com. So make sure you head over there today, grab that training for free, and make sure that you watch it, because the sooner you get started on implementing these strategies, the sooner you can see results and continue to grow your mortgage business. Thank you again for being here with us for this episode, and enjoy another one on the Loan Officer Wealth Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a very special episode of the Loan Officer Wealth Podcast. We have Phil Treadwell with us today. Phil, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you having me, man. I appreciate what you're doing, and both for the industry and for loan officers. So I appreciate you having me on the show.
That's amazing. Well, I don't want to brag too much, but I do have a little bit of an intro here. Phil was actually named one of the 40 most influential mortgage professionals under 40, and was also recognized as the most connected mortgage professional by National Mortgage Professional magazine. Also listed as one of the top 20 mortgage professionals in 2020 by Yahoo Finance, and holds the record from my favorite episode with Gary Vee. So we've got all of that together in one episode here today, and I'm just thrilled to have you on the show, Phil.
Oh man, I appreciate all that. It's humbling to hear for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's get right into it. So, if you wouldn't mind, for those listeners that may not have heard of you, can you give us just a little bit about your background, how you got into the mortgage industry, and what your journey's been like so far?
For sure. Well, the short version is I grew up in Missouri. After I graduated high school, went to University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Go Hogs!
Oh,
And
nice.
from there, I had done a couple odd jobs, different sales jobs, management jobs, and I got in the industry. I was working for my dad. He's a builder, and I had considered taking over his company. And he just said, "You need to think long and hard before you want to do this for 30 or 40 years, because you saw the 90s of the good part. You don't remember quite the 70s and 80s when things were tough." So I thought if I tried out a couple of more jobs or whatever, that then I would just circle back. But I answered a newspaper ad. It kind of dates me a little bit. This is back in 2003, 2004.
No
Answered a
way.
newspaper ad. They were looking for someone with sales and management experience, of which I had both. And it turned out to be a mortgage company. It was a little mortgage banker that did a lot of conventional FHA, VA, USDA loans. This was kind of the heyday of the subprime, fog a mirror, get a loan type of stuff. And I was very, very fortunate to get to work for a company that really taught the fundamentals of how to be a successful loan officer. And so did pretty well, and eventually, ran a branch. It started a net branch, a little franchise, opened up my own broker shop, my own company around 2006, which in retrospect was not the perfect timing to be going out on your own in a financial services industry. But fortunately, Wells Fargo had approached several times and eventually bought out my company so that I would go to work for them. Was a top producer 2008, 2009 for them in several states. Didn't love the big bank model. Didn't fit kind of what I was wanting to do, and really found a home in kind of mid-sized mortgage bankers and smaller companies. So kind of advanced on into area and regional roles, and came to the company I'm with now, Thrive Mortgage, a couple of years ago as a national director, doing sales, innovation, strategy, talent attraction, things of that nature. But my wife was also working for our company and it was a licensed loan officer. And I realized I still had a lot of productive years left. And while I loved what I was doing and loved our company, I really missed sales. I really missed kind of being on the
Mm.
ground. So we built a team, and about a year ago decided to come back onto the front lines, if you will, to develop relationships with loan officers and clients, and created your Brew team. And Brew is an acronym for Build Real Estate Wealth.
Oh,
And we
nice.
realized we were at the phase of life where we wanted to use real estate as a tool. We wanted to help create strategies for our clients, for realtors, and really focus on a different aspect than what I felt like a lot of people in the industry were looking at. And so that's why I'm a fan of what you're doing, because we're talking about not just how to grow in this industry for growth's sake, but how do you transition that and put that into helping our industry not only grow as individuals, but what our industry can do for the community and what it can do for other people. So
That is amazing. And what a, like you've seen almost every single aspect of the business. That's incredible.
yeah, it's I've worn a lot of hats and done some different things on the sales side of the industry anyway. There's not a whole lot that I've not been exposed to, and I think it's helped to really kind of understand the different sides of the business. Whenever you have different positions, you see the why behind a lot of
Yeah.
things. I know loan officers and people within the branch have a very different perspective than some of the regional or even corporate positions. And so I think that's kind of given me some insight to not only how to be more effective and efficient, but realize kind of how all the pieces go together.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm very interested because you've seen, I mean, coming up when you did and seeing like that old school belly to belly sales. And now everybody's obsessed with, TikTok and Instagram and how do I generate consumer direct leads from the internet? And there's been this huge change and you've experienced so much of it. So do you find that the core fundamentals of how to grow a mortgage business have changed? Do you think it's different now, or do you think that personal relationships are still just as important? Like, where are you seeing the industry going right now?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. The short version of that is business has been done, is being done, and will always be done based upon relationships.
Yes.
Where I think social media comes into play is you have an opportunity to reach an exponential number of people that we didn't have before. I tell the story that when I first got in the business, that first company that hired me, I went through 4 days of classroom style training. And on the fifth day, on that Friday, I followed my manager, my boss at the time, around kind of his milk route, all of his realtors and referral partners that he did, and kind of saw him interact and hand out some flyers. So when I came back on that next Monday, he was standing at those big monstrosity of copy machines, right? Those fridge sized copy machines. And we had, again, kind of dates me a little bit. We had letterhead at the time, and he
Nice.
whited out the corporate information at the bottom, and he cut out these flyers that he had just printed off on his computer, and he literally put scotch tape taped in the middle and started photocopying 100 at a time. And he did this with about 10 different flyers, and he put those big black binder clips that we used to use back in the day on the top of them, and he stacked them in this big paper like Xerox box and hands them to me and said, go talk to realtors and tell them to send you business. And I remember it's going to make me feel old because I map quested from my apartment. I was going to get a reaction there, from my apartment to all the different offices, and I could go and hit all the offices and make it back to my apartment by lunch. And I would have lunch, and I would do the same thing again, the same route in the afternoon. And I remember, all real estate offices have that gatekeeper, if you
Hmm.
will. And I remember this lady asked me, she said, don't you think if you keep coming every morning and afternoon that they're not going to want to work with you because they're not, they don't think you're doing any business? And I looked her straight in the eye and I said, if the same realtors here morning and afternoon, they're not doing any business either. And I just grinned and walked right past. And so I did that every single day for about 2 or 2.5 weeks
Wow.
before I ever before I ever had a really substantial conversation. Now, people would say hi's, you might, chat with somebody for a second, but the first realtor that ever stopped and had a conversation or even offered a lead, she asked me, she said, hey, well, she goes, hey, is that your black Jeep out there? And at the time I was driving a beat up black Jeep Grand Cherokee that like smoked. And when she said, hey, is that your black Jeep out there? I thought I either parked in someone's parking space or it's not smoking anymore. It's on fire, right? I could both these two things. The thought never crossed my mind that she might want to have a conversation. I said, yeah. And she said, with the Razorback on the back of it? And I said, yeah. And she said, who are you? What are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I'm Phil Treadwell with Heartland Funding. Oh, okay. You're a lender. Like, shut up. I get it. And I said, yeah. And she said, can you do bridge loans? And I remember my boss telling me at the time, because they were a full service lender, if someone says, can you do X? You just say yes, because we can do everything.
Yep.
And so I said, yes. And she's like, okay, I have a lead for you. And she writes down a name and an address. It wasn't even a phone number, a name and an address. And I drove 30 minutes from that office. This guy had a race car engine shop next to his house. And of course, the entire way I'm calling my boss, I'm blowing up his phone because he's not answering. You got to tell me what a bridge loan is. I don't even know what I'm doing. So I drove all the way out there. And long story short, I took my very first application on this anvil vice clamp thing in a race car engine shop, and just like did it by hand. And the point of that story, the reason I tell that story sometimes is, not only is the world different, it's very different. But
Yeah.
at the core of it, when people are posting on social media, when we're doing podcasts, when we're doing any type of a marketing is about getting someone's attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sales is what makes them a customer. People confuse the two. So when we're marketing, all we're trying to do is get someone's attention, get them to know who we are, right? That know,
Yep.
like, and trust. And then we need to have a conversation. Where most people miss the boat is they are so focused on how many views, how many likes, how many comments, what kind of engagement are they getting, instead of using that to create more engagement for the purposes of taking those relationships offline. They focus on the views and the likes as the metric of success. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but someone could give me 1,000 leads and I don't make any money unless it turns into a closed transaction.
That's right.
And so that's really what I think the spirit of what people need to understand is, you can either use these tools to create conversations and create relationships and take them offline and turn them into, doing business and doing deals, or you can go back to walking around all day handing out black and white photocopies, flyers, and hopefully someone along the way will have you give you a lead. And one other little tidbit there, the only reason she stopped me was because turns out her husband was an Arkansas alumni, so she was a Razorback fan and saw that on there. So a lot of times we think we need to be experts, or we need to like have all this great pitch. At the end of the day, there was something in common that we had, which
Yeah.
created an opportunity to have a conversation. And that's what we need to be focusing on social media. Talk about who we are, not just what we do, and create opportunities that people want to have a conversation with us.
Yeah, that is so true. And I always see people that have been so hesitant to get on social media, and then they've finally tipped over because they realize it's not going away. The internet's not a fad. Social's not a fad. It's here to stay. So they begrudgingly come on, and then basically it's like rate sheets. Like they'll post that's the extent of their comment or content, and it's people want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. We all know this. And social media is your opportunity to share that other side of your life, of who you are, so that you
Yeah.
can attract like-minded people in your marketplace that want to do business with you. I think that's often overlooked.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I recently listened to a podcast episode on Ed Milet's podcast with Rory Vaden. And Rory Vaden has a company called the Brand Builders Group. And he's helped build brands like Ed Milet and Lewis Howes and John Gordon and some really, really big educators and influencers. And they were talking on there about, they had done a study and polled a ton of people about who they wanted to see a personal brand from. And some of the highest percentages were their doctor, their attorney, their financial advisor. And what they found in the correlation there was, the higher the need for trust, the more people wanted to see a brand from them. And again, when you think about what a personal brand is, it's not a shtick or a logo. A personal brand is putting out who you are, right? To that know, like, and trust. Well, if people need to trust you or really want to trust you to do business with you, before they can get there, they have to know about who you are. And you think about, the menial things that we don't want to put on social media, like what we do for fun, what we do with our families on the weekends. All of that stuff is actually the exact thing, the exact thing that people want to see, so that they can feel relatable. I mean, you think about any time if you have to have the services of an attorney, or you're going to a doctor's office or anything like that, there's a little bit of anxiety, right? There's these business professionals, not because of necessarily the people that they are, but because of what their profession represents. Well, imagine if you're getting ready to go meet one of those people or do business with some of those people, but you know that they like the same restaurants you do, that they saw a movie a couple of weeks ago that you liked as well. All of a sudden, the entire dynamic shifts, and it's not one of you take their opinion with a grain of salt, like that old adage of the more familiar people get with you, the less they respect you. Or I think that's an old way of doing business. I think the more
I
people
agree.
know you, the more the reason they have to respect you and trust your advice. So it's a really cool episode. I highly recommend everybody listen to it, but it really explains that a personal brand, while as Gary Vee said, it can be come across as kind of a douchey term. It's really just digitized reputation. It's who
Yes.
you are. It's what your reputation is, and it's put online. And you have to showcase who you are, not just what you do. Like I said a second ago, before people can really buy into that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, a double edged sword. Nobody wants to go to the dentist who spends his time as a taxidermist
Yeah.
in the background,
True story. True story. You do
But,
have to take it with a grain of salt, and I wouldn't advise you just taking pictures of your food, right? That was
right.
that was Instagram 8 or 9 years ago, or 5 years ago, or whatever. But in context, like this morning I had a cool I went to a coffee shop I'd never been to before that was actually really close to my office, and I met a friend there. It was a really neat coffee shop, and I can see it becoming one of my favorites. And so I just took a picture of the front of it and put, "Hey, I went here for a coffee appointment. This is a really cool place. You should check it out." And within an hour, I had 3 or 4 people message me and ask where it was or what it was about. And all it was, one of them was a realtor that I didn't even know was following me on social media. But it created an opportunity to chat, be like, "Yeah, I need to buy you a cup there sometime." It was that had this cool upstairs area. I didn't say, "Hey, I'm a lender. Do you want to do business?"
Yep.
No. I took a second to be human, right? The one thing I'll also say on that is, we inherently trust people that we have things in common with.
Yes.
And if you think about it on a very basic level, when you're at the grocery store or the DMV, and you speak to someone, you always talk about the weather first. And
Hmm.
that's always kind of like a stereotype of, "Oh, we're going to talk about the weather." The reason we do that is because that's the one thing we for sure have in common with that person at that time. You're in the
Yeah.
same place, the weather's going to be the same. And then you find out your cousin went to school with their uncle, or whatever, and it starts a conversation. Well, social media has limitless opportunities for you to put something out there that someone else may have in common, and then it creates the conversation. And I have a feeling that most of the people listening to this podcast, or anybody that follows either one of us on social media, who's in a business of any type, if they had an opportunity to have 6, 8, 10 conversations a day, they would find ways to turn those conversations into opportunities to do business. So instead of worrying about leads, instead of worrying about, how many likes and follows you get, how many conversations did you start? How many opportunities did you have to showcase, "Hey, I'm a real human being that's just like you, that has things in common." And to your point, we do business with people we like.
Yep. Absolutely. And I feel like, well, this goes down a completely different pathway into how the technology is actually enabling us to connect with these people. But as you put that content out, the social networks are getting smarter and smarter at connecting you with the people that you want to be connected with. And just a
Mm-hmm.
dollar a day in advertising can put you in front of a highly targeted local marketplace. And it doesn't have to be a mortgage ad. It
Yeah.
can be that brand building content. So we had a guest on the podcast. His name is Dennis Yu, and he's a like ninja
Yeah.
marketing guy.
Dennis has
All
actually
about.
been on the podcast several years ago.
Oh no
On
way!
my podcast. Yeah, he Blitz Metrics, if I remember correctly. I don't know if
Yes,
that's still
yeah,
the name
that's
of his
right.
company. It used to be. He was speaking at a conference, and I was doing some podcasting there and pulled him aside. at the time, they had spent more money on Facebook ads than I think any other company out there at all.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear what he had to say, because he's a genius.
So he's big on TikTok right now. Just released a brand new book about TikTok. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But he told me that the TikTok algorithm is one of the only algorithms in social media that is actually geographically based. So if you go on TikTok and you go to the coffee shop that you were at, and you turn on TikTok and you shoot a quick little reel, or do a little bit of content in front of that building, TikTok has the technology to recognize the building, know where it is, know where you were located, and then for the next 48 hours, it will show your content to people that have been in the same location.
That's interesting.
So if you think about it from like being the mayor of your local community and your digital community, if you're in your and I we know for a fact that Facebook and all of these other networks are trying to take that similar technology and apply it. Think about your YouTube videos, your Facebook, your Instagram. If you're just being yourself, but also layering in that knowledge base of how you help people, it can be transformational for really high quality leads. I'm not talking about like running Facebook and Instagram ads, because we did a ton of that in the past, and we're not recommending Facebook and Instagram ads for people in the mortgage industry anymore, because the quality of just a lead that comes in off a mortgage ad isn't high enough to make the return on investment good enough to make it worthwhile. But being the mayor of your own digital community is, I think, the future of where marketing is going. Now, off on a little rabbit hole there. I'm interested in how you coming back to direct lending, how you're looking at your marketing and advertising approach now. Like, what's your plan for building relationships with realtors, going consumer direct? I would love to hear what your plan is.
Yeah.
If
So
you're
it
willing to
was.
share it, that is.
Oh, absolutely. I've had a few conversations on podcasts about it before. The first piece of it was kind of setting up the difficulty that it really posed, because almost all of my content from the preceding 5-6 years was really all business to business. It was geared toward other mortgage professionals and real estate professionals. And so going to a direct to consumer model, it was a shift, because consumers don't care about the same things that business people are paying attention to per se for the same purpose. And so that was the first thing we had to recognize, is we have a different audience. The second thing that we realized was that audience is bombarded with a ton more content. And it's not even that you're competing with another reel or TikTok or YouTube video. You're competing with Hulu and Netflix
Yeah.
and all of these other content platforms. So what we realized was that for the purposes of creating relationships with people that we could refer business, or that could refer business to us in real estate professionals, or creating relationships with clients, we had to have a reason, right? If you want to do more business, if you want to make more money, you need to solve more problems, and you need to show people how you can solve their problems. And so it was kind of a two-pronged approach that we've taken. One is, what is the number one problem that most real estate professionals have? Right? Doing more business.
Yeah.
They want to find more buyers, and they want to find more sellers. So I realized we were in a unique position with the podcast and having collaborated and done a lot of things in the content space. We were going to take the approach of, hey, we'd like to create some content with you. We'll either record a podcast style interview and chop it up into some videos, or show you how to do that, or talk about a potential brand strategy. And for those people that are ho-humming talking to realtors, probably now more than ever have I heard people, I don't like to work with realtors. I don't like to work with realtors. I understand why. And we don't need to go down that specific, side of the conversation. But what I will say is that one of the things that you can do in talking to any realtor, I don't care if they have a preferred lender, I don't care if their lender is their spouse, but you say, hey, we're not trying to infringe on that relationship. You can keep doing everything you're doing right there. However, what if we could create some additional business over here? What if you
Yep.
and I can have a conversation about adding to what you're already doing? I don't know of anyone that's going to turn down additional business, or at least a conversation about additional business. So what the short version of that is, we've decided to take the approach of, we want to come alongside you and create additional business. We want to create content, and we want to help you, like you said, be the mayor of your own community. What does that look like? And in the basic marketing formula that everyone can use for themselves, or that you can use when talking to other professionals, is just understanding, one, who is your audience? What is the
Yep.
audience you're wanting to reach with a piece of content, or social? The second is, what value or message is it you're trying to deliver that audience? And then the last thing is, what is the most effective medium to deliver that message and value to that audience? And for a lot of people, they don't stop and think about that. They think, I need to start a YouTube channel because I heard someone got a lot of leads from YouTube, and not
Yep.
understanding that their particular audience may not be consuming a lot of YouTube videos, or
Yeah.
their audience may or may not be on TikTok. So I say that to say, we understood that with real estate professionals, we needed to have a conversation of, where is their audience? What type of niche are they trying to build? And that might be helping them start a podcast. That might be helping them do short form content, or all of the above. On the consumer side, the biggest problem that most consumers have, especially in an economy like this, is, how do you make more money? How do you bridge the gap from increasing prices to what they make? If inflation's outpacing their income, or if one of their industries is getting beat up because of the economy, and what is the main problem people have is money. And we
Yep.
understand that real estate is uniquely positioned to not only be a hedge against inflation. You can create net worth with it, but you can also create passive income with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know of anybody between the ages of 20 and 65 that hasn't thought about selling everything and getting into a VW bus or an RV and traveling the world. Well, you
Yep.
need passive income to do that. Or maybe you're passionate about what you do and you love what you do, but you want to increase net worth for retirement or for financial legacy or whatever else. So what we did is, we decided we were going to focus on a strategy. We were going to start having conversations initially, and understanding, when someone calls us, they're going to talk about rate, because our industry has had a very poor history of not giving them anything else to talk about. They
Yeah,
don't know
that's
what
right.
else to talk about, right?
Yep.
I ask this a lot when someone is in the industry. How many times have you gone to a kid's sporting event, or to a cocktail party, or a place where you didn't know a lot of people, and they say, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm in the mortgage business. What's the first question they ask? What are rates doing right now?
Yep.
Right? 99% of the time. Well, that's because we've sucked for so long as an industry in giving them something else to talk about. And so what we do is, when we have that initial client conversation, we ask them, what is significant about this home purchase?
Right.
We find out the why. And sometimes you have to ask a couple of times. And that's one of the things that I'm speaking at Sales Mastery this year with Todd Duncan. And the conversation we're going to have is around this concept right here of, we had a lady, a quick example. She called to ask about some of the bond down payment assistance programs that we have here in Texas. And I said, hey, before we get into that, I'd love to know just more about you and what you've got going on. What's significant about this home purchase? And she said, I want to own property. I said, that's awesome. I said, that's part of the American dream. Everybody should want to do that. But what's significant about owning property for you? And she said, she was middle-aged. She said, I have a longtime boyfriend. He owns a house. I want to own a house so that if in a couple of years we get married, we could buy a house together and keep these two houses, and we would have a couple of rental properties.
Hmm.
I said, hey, that's awesome. I mean, now we're talking about, investing in real estate and
Right.
maybe creating some income for you. What's significant about having some investment properties and whatnot? And it took 3 times before it came out. She said, well, my grandparents had a pretty tough go of it in life, but they made something of themselves, and they had property, and they passed it down to my parents and aunts and uncles, but they didn't do a very good job of being a good steward of that. They kind of lost it, squandered it, whatever. So my generation and my cousins feel like it's our responsibility to change our family tree.
Hmm.
I said, okay, well, now we're talking about generational wealth.
Right.
Now, 2 things happened in this conversation. One, she called to talk about bond and down payment assistance money. And we got to her real why is about generational wealth.
Yeah.
And in between there, not only as a potential, relationship as a lender with this client, not only are we talking about this initial purchase, but we're talking about a purchase if she gets married and other potential investment properties down the road. And we, I think, understood when we started having this conversation about putting a team together, if we can figure out a way to create strategies, very simple ones that they can buy into and understand about how we're going to help them achieve their short and long-term financial goals through real estate and using a mortgage and be a debt advisor. Everyone has an attorney, a CPA, a mortgage professional is a unique position to be a debt advisor and be part of that financial services list that most people have, that we could not only create long-term relationships, but throughout the mortgage transaction, when you need someone to get a piece of documentation for we've all had those buyers that they need a little motivation to do what you're asking them to do for their own good. Well, now what happens is we have a why to filter it through. So if they need a little nudging, it's as simple as, hey, I know that you've got big plans for purchasing other homes. Go ahead and get these couple of documents for me, because once we get this closed, we can then start talking about these next things, and very gently just put their why back in front of them. And all of a sudden they realize this isn't this frustrating mortgage process that they feel like they're going through at times. They realize this is all for a purpose. And so having a short conversation on the front end can completely change the dynamic. So in the first 20 or 30 minutes, we never talk rate. We never talk loan product. We don't have to, because we're talking about them, and people, all of a sudden the walls come down. You find commonalities. Oh, hey, you're from an area where I have someone in my family that lives. And again, we find those commonalities to where when you then ask them about an application, or when then you explain your lock strategy, they don't have any reason to question it. You're not someone who's selling something. You're this person that they got to know that they have something in common with. And so the last thing I'll say on that is, from the initial lead, we have all of our referral partner, anybody who refers us, whether it's a realtor or a mutual friend, we always have them do a 3-way introduction, whether that's via text or email. The reason we do that is, if you think, Chris, if you and I, if I made an introduction to, let's say I knew Joe Rogan, if I said, hey, Chris, meet Joe, Joe, meet Chris, whatever. And then you respond to that 3-way text message, say, oh, Joe, so nice to meet you. I'm so glad Phil made the intro. Joe now has some friendly pressure to respond, because two people in that conversation have done it, where if I just give you a number to text Joe, you're the only one knows whether he texts back or not, and he doesn't know you, so doesn't owe you anything. So the first step is always have that 3-way intro. And then from that 3-way intro, we get about a 90%, 95% conversion into an initial consult.
Wow.
And from that initial consult, we're getting over 3/4 of those are converting into applications. So this initial part of the funnel is really where people lose opportunities and leads. And then once they talk to the lead, they either don't get him to do an application, or someone say, hey, well, send me some numbers first, or there's about 26 different things that go into quoting an interest rate. And because we have this strategy, we're trying to get, let's do this application so that I can give you good, accurate information. And we're not trying to build a plan or a strategy on assumptions. All of a sudden you're aligning your interests. You're not just asking them to do something you want to do. You're explaining why it's important for them to want to do it.
Oh man, that's so powerful. And I mean, just that 3-way introduction. So we make phone calls to past customers to generate referrals, and that strategy right there is absolutely something that we need to get worked into that process. That's incredibly valuable, Phil.
Absolutely.
Now, one quick question.
Sure.
Do you have a coach?
Have lots of coaches. Now I have done paid coaching in the past with people. I've coached with Tim Berheim and Scott Bertone at Performance 360. And I've had different paid coaching throughout, but I do have a coach. Right now, my two coaches or mentors, if you will, are Todd Duncan and Renee Rodriguez. I talk to them actively. Renee has become a very, good friend and mentor through me over the years. Todd has as well. Obviously, Barry Habib's been a huge influence. He was our very first podcast guest, and he's done a lot for my business over the years. So those are three people who have had huge impacts, and not to leave anyone out, there's been a lot of others. But I can say I'm not only a huge advocate for coaching and mentorship, I'll go as far as to say probably every success or win I've had in business has been directly related to a coach or mentor
Hmm.
that's taken their experience and imparted it to me in wisdom. Now,
Mhm.
I still make a ton of mistakes, don't get me wrong, but the clarifying, you know, uh, thought process of someone who has done what you want to do, been where you've, want to be, or even just has a different perspective is invaluable.
That is, yeah, that's fantastic. That's super valuable. So, incredible knowledge. Thank you for sharing a little bit of a coaching session here, and we'll take a little bit of a different path. Hence,
Sure.
the name of the podcast is the Loan Officer Wealth Podcast.
Yeah.
And in the initial genesis of the podcast, I really wanted to bring financial tools to loan officers so that, like, yes, you have a career and you're making all this income. What do you do with it? How do you truly become wealthy as a
Yeah.
result of being in the mortgage industry? So, I was just opening that up. What are you seeing from a generational wealth, from a wealth creation, passive income conversation? What are you seeing working really well right now? What are you advising your clients on?
Yeah. That's another great question. So, to set that up, I think that when you talk about generations, our parents and our grandparents had a different view of not only how to create wealth, but how to maintain wealth, and I use wealth of any type of financial assets, right? If you, whether it's cash, whether it's whatever. And a lot of theirs was in the markets, whether that was stocks and bonds and mutual funds and things of that nature, IRAs, 401ks. And I'm the preface is I'm not saying those aren't good vehicles. I'm saying the opinion of most people out there is that it's kind of a crapshoot, that
Yep.
the institutional investors, it's all skewed their way, and that the little guy, can't get ahead. And so I don't think that most people right now love having conversations about those types of things. And so, and I don't, and my original degree was in financial management and investing. That's what I wanted to, I finished with a different degree, but that was the path I was going to go down, was one of a financial advisor. Did a ton of stock portfolios and made a lot of money on paper, through those, and thought to myself, hey, this is easy. Like I did this mock stock portfolio in college. I made a ton of money. Like I can do this. And then I realized it was like the 90s and 2000s. And I think
Right.
anybody that picked any stock out of the paper was making money at that time. And so my skill and talent that I thought I had, I realized wasn't there. But I say that right now, you also have to look, if the institutional investors are the ones that winning, what are they purchasing? And I know in the state of Texas, one of every three purchases in the last 12 months of homes, a single family homes in the state of Texas, one of every three was by an institutional investor,
No
whether it was
way.
whether it was a hedge fund, whether it was a property management company, was a private equity, whatever. And I think that number is as high as 1 in 4 on average across the country. Okay, so people are buying up real estate in droves, which has contributed to some of the supply issues and some of those things. Another statistic that's important to understand is between 2010 and 2019, there were only 5.6 million homes built in that 10-year time period. The prior 6 10-year time periods were somewhere between 15 and 25 million homes per year.
Hmm.
So when you combine the fact that we stopped building homes almost entirely for a decade because of the financial crash, and you tie that to, we all know millennials are now the driving force in home buying, the largest generation ever. Supply and demand is a huge issue, and there's numbers
Yes.
everywhere to support that. Whenever you think about the fact that institutional investors are playing a role in a game that already has short supply, you have to ask yourself why. What is the opportunity there? So I think investing in real estate, especially over the next 5 and 10 years, is probably the best investment that anyone can make, whether you're in the industry or out of the industry. And I know it sounds self-serving, but there's a dozen different metrics that we could talk about that we won't get into all the granular details here. But the short version is homes are still going to appreciate, homes are still going to cash flow. And another quick example is people are hesitant to buy investment properties right now. They're saying interest rates have gone up and prices have gone up. Well, if you go back to 2019 or 2020 and look at the home price and then which on average and which you could rent that home out on average, that margin or cash flow, if you want to call it, that margin cash flow is less than it is right now.
Yep.
Even with higher interest rates and higher home prices, rents have outpaced both of them to where your cash flow and margin on investment property is actually higher.
Yeah.
And so the argument can be made that it's a better time to buy investment properties and rentals than it was, 2 and 3 years ago. You also throw in short-term rentals. There's just a ton of opportunity in real estate. That's what my wife and I really are focusing on, the meat of what our investment and wealth creation activities are. And I think other people should as well. And the last thing I'll say is Dan Fleischman is someone I recently saw at Neil Dingra's Forward conference. And Dan Fleischman is connected with everyone. He's in a lot of mastermind groups. He's a venture capital guy. And I think he has the record for being the youngest CEO of a publicly traded company. One of the companies he invested in, it was a CEO, went public. And he's a very unassuming guy. He was on stage in a flannel shirt and vintage Nikes, right? And he kind of laid out a really cool investment strategy that I want to share because I think it's valuable for people. He calls it the 40-40-20. And essentially what that is he said you need to have 40% of your investments in what he calls boring, lower yield returns, right?
Okay.
Those are in inflation hedges, right? That's where you're talking about, currencies, stocks and bonds potentially, in things that are just going to grow and give you return and are just going to kind of be a hedge against inflation. The next 40% are kind of your medium risk but higher yield. Real estate fits in that categories. Businesses that have established cash flows for 12 months that are doing a couple of million a year, things of that nature. And he said then the other 20% is where you can be a little more risky, whether you're talking crypto, or if you're or NFTs, or if someone's doing a startup company or something of that nature. And he said the reason why is if you look over this, that first 40% is really your base. You're not going to lose any money on that. You're just a hedge against inflation, maybe make a little bit. That middle 40% is where you're really going to create long-term returns. It's still pretty safe, but you can get some bigger returns, maybe some smaller, but it averages out. Now, the 20%, yeah, you may lose more than you win, but when you win, a lot of times you win big.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. And there's some examples that he talks about. And if you go check out his content, he talks about this everywhere. But I really think that's kind of the new way that we need to be looking at our investments and how we create wealth long term. We got to have a base that we can draw from. We got to take some risks that are consistent money making investments. And then there's some ones that we need to take some higher risks and take a shot every once in a while and feel comfortable about it because of the way that we have the rest of our portfolio set up. So again, for us, that middle 40% is probably a little bit bigger because it's got a lot of real estate. I don't put a lot of stuff in cash and cash equivalents because we put those into our businesses as well. Yeah. But we do take a few risks on some things. Crypto is something that's, I think, extremely interesting. I know that gets a lot of press, and I will say, for those that are either excited about crypto or even down on crypto, you need to remember the entire crypto market combined is still smaller than the market cap of Apple just by itself. So that we're in the infancy of this. And so that's why I think people need to pay attention to it and participate, because I have a feeling it's going to get a lot bigger than just the market cap of a company the size of Apple. And you want to be positioned where you don't look back and be like, man, I should have bought Microsoft in the 80s when it's the middle of 2000s.
Yep, I could not agree more. Absolutely. Man, Phil, thank you so much for being on the show and just sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. We could talk for hours.
Absolutely.
If we get the opportunity to have you back on the show, I would love to have you back and continue the conversation. If people are, first off, tell us about the podcast. Where can people reach out? How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, podcast is Mortgage Marketing Expert. You can find it pretty much on where all fine podcasts are sold. We push that out about everywhere. Online, if you go to mmepodcast.com, you'll see a link tree that has quick links to subscribe to the main platforms. And we've got some cool guests coming up. We just started a local realtor series that we've gotten some good feedback on. We're just kind of talking to local realtors throughout the country, started with a few here in DFW, getting their perspective and not a high level view, some people that are in it. And yesterday I had a cool opportunity to do a recording with Brad Lee. So that episode is going to be coming out very soon as well.
Very cool. Well, I will certainly be listening to that one. That's fantastic. And yeah, that is amazing. Well, again, thank you for being so generous with your time. For all our listeners, don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure you head on over and give Phil some love for being on the show. And have a great day, everybody. Thanks again, Phil.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's Chris. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed our guest today on the podcast. This is a reminder that we have just finished taking the greatest lessons from all of our guests and packaging them together into a brief online video presentation that's going to teach you the 10 most profitable ways to grow your mortgage business. And then we show you how to automate those processes in your business with people and systems so that you get the results without you having to do the work every day. This is quite literally a blueprint so that you walk into your mortgage business every day with pre-booked appointments with borrowers that want to meet with you and referral partners that want to send you business, so that you are spending your time inside your mortgage business on the highest dollar per hour activities, and you truly become the executive of your business, a true business owner, rather than just somebody who's going to a job every day and making a wage on the way through. This is an absolutely incredibly powerful training for you, and I cannot wait for you to experience it. So head on over to chriswebinar.com. That's chriswebinar.com to get that free training today. Now, if you could do me another favor, if you enjoyed this episode, please head on over to iTunes, search the Loan Officer Wealth Podcast, and give us a 5-star rating and review, really on any podcast platform that you're watching this on. That just 30 seconds of your time goes to help another loan officer in the industry discover this information and really help put their life and their business on track for more success. We are all in this together, and there is more than enough for all of us in the industry. So I would love if you left us that 5-star rating and review. Don't forget to stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll see you then.